Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor E. Frankl. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way, by Viktor E. Frankl. Man's Search for Meaning is a book written by Viktor E. Frankl about his 3-year-long period as a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, a tale of struggle and hope. Dr. Frankl created his own version of psychotherapy, logotherapy, of modern existential analysis, writing his book using his personal experiences. He lost every passion and value he held in that camp. Frankl attributes several forms of neurosis and the noogenic neurosis to the failure of the suffering to find meaning and a sense of responsibilities in his existence. This book is about sacrifices, crucifixion, and the death of the great army of unknown and unrecorded victims during the Second World War. What are the experiences he divulged? In the camp, capos had the best life. They were like the supervisors in the camp. The prisoners had the hardest time. Capos were chosen from prisoners, but they eventually became indistinguishable from the SS. It was an irrelevant struggle for the daily bread, and for life itself. For one's sake, or for that of one of a good friend, sick or feeble prisoners who were incapable of work were sent to big central camps which were fitted with gas chambers and crematoriums. It didn't really matter which, since each of them were nothing other than a number. Those numbers were their identification and were literally tattooed on the prisoner's skin. Every man was controlled by one thought only: to keep himself alive for the family waiting for him at home, and to save his friend. Due to that, everyone became selfish, making others victims. Only miracles or lucky chances led someone to come back from there. Viktor Frankl was not a psychiatrist in the camp. He was digging and laying tracks for railway lines. Prisoners got some coupons to get cigarettes when they did dangerous jobs and could exchange those with soup as a respite from starvation. When a prisoner smoked his own cigarettes, it gave a signal that he'd given up faith. There were 3 stages of the prisoner's life there. The first was the period following his admission, and it characterized the shock. The second period when he was well entrenched in camp routine, and the third was his release and liberation. There were some sensations like strange kinds of humor, curiosity about whether he would make it out alive. Prisoners had many surprises during their sleep hours, their clothes, and more. Most prisoners committed suicide by touching the electrically charged barbed wire fence. It was their only escape. The only way to survive was to be fit enough to work in the camp. The main symptoms of the second phase in prisoners were insensible and necessary mechanisms for self-defense, but religious interests developed within prisoners. Even in camp, some prisoners were reminded of their wives and their loving moments. It gave them the courage to forget the hardness in a camp for a while. Frankl realized love finds its deepest meaning in spiritual being, his inner self. Love is strong enough to strengthen mentally. With the beauty of art and nature's influence, the prisoner sometimes can even forget his own frightful circumstances, and they could find a sense of humor, and humor was another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. Sometimes they envied other prisoners who were relatively well-regulated, secure, and happy in life. Sometimes the meager pleasure of the camp life provided a negative happiness. When prisoners became sick, their daily bread and quantity of soup were also reduced at the camp. Even if sick, Viktor Frankl was ready to be a doctor for other patients, because he wanted to give a meaning for his death or life. There is an influence in the world which is no longer recognized: the value of human life and human dignity. This had robbed man of his will and had made him an object to be exterminated. Under this influence, a person's ego suffered a loss of value. At the camp, if the prisoner didn't struggle to save his life respect with every effort, he lost the feeling of being an individual, being with a mind with inner freedom and personal value. Thus, his existence descended to the level of animal life. Prisoners always yearn for privacy and solitude. At the camp, prisoners' lives only depended on the moods of guards and fate, and this made them even less human than the circumstances warranted. No matter the circumstance, Frankl always told the truth. In final days, Frankl realized that just how uncertain human decisions are, especially in matters of life and death, because of lack of sleep, starvation, overcrowded huts, lack of hygiene, and sanitation. There was a general irritability to the mental state of the prisoner's mind. Not only physical causes, but also some mental states like conflicts among degraded majority and promoted minorities also caused irritability in the prisoner's mind. What are the values that give meaning to human life even in a critical situation, as Frankl explained? Creativeness and enjoyment are necessary for a meaningful life, but not only those. If life has meaning, then the suffering also has meaning in a life. Suffering is an eradicable part of life, even as fate and death. Without suffering and death, human life cannot be complete. It may remain brave, dignified, and unselfishness. But some conflicts make you forget human dignity when it comes to self-preservation. And also, man's inner strength may raise him above his outward fate. If a man cannot see the end of his provisional existence, he is not able to aim at the ultimate goal in his life. People who don't take life seriously and despise it as something of no consequence, who love to live in the past by closing their eyes, find no meaning in life. Few people are capable of achieving great spiritual heights, and only a few are given the chance to attain human greatness, even through their apparent worldly failure and death, an accomplishment which in ordinary circumstances they would never have achieved. At the camp, some made life into an inner triumph, while others ignored challenges and simply vegetate. Sudden loss of courage and hope can have a deadly effect. It is important to teach the despairing man that it didn't really matter what we expect from life, but rather what life expected from us. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. The meaning of life differs from man to man and from situation to situation. Every situation is distinguished by its uniqueness, and there is always one right answer to the problem posed by the situation at hand. A man should acknowledge that even in suffering, he is a unique individual. Frankl explained that the meaning of life embraced the wider circles of life and death, of suffering and of dying according to his experiences of concentration camps. When suffering, there is no need to be ashamed of tears. Tears display the greatest courage of men, the courage to suffer. What is logotherapy? Logotherapy is a form of psychotherapy focused on helping patients find meaning in life in three ways: work and hobbies, experience life and people or love, and developing a positive attitude. Dr. Viktor E. Frankl used his own version of psychotherapy, which is named by Logotherapy, of modern existential data analysis. Logotherapy is the pursuit of meaning for one's life. Logotherapy is a method less retrospective and less introspective. Logotherapy focuses rather on the future, on the experiences to be fulfilled by the patient in his future. And also, logotherapy defocuses all the vicious circle formations and feedback mechanisms which play such a great role in the development of neuroses. In its most advanced form, logotherapy confronts the patient with his problems and reorients it toward the meaning of his life. And to make him aware of his meaning contributes a lot to his ability to overcome his neuroses. Logotherapy is striving to find a meaning in one's life and making it the primary motivational force in a man. A man is able to live and even die for the sake of his ideals and values. An individual's concern with values is really a camouflage of hidden inner conflicts, but they represent the expectations from the rule rather than the rule itself. When men become frustrated, for example, is one thing logotherapy explores in its three ways of existential frustration: existence as the human mode of being, the meaning of existence, and the striving to find a concrete meaning in personal existence. Pondering over the worthwhileness of life is an existential distress, but by no means a mental disease. Man's search for meaning may arouse inner tension rather than inner equilibrium. Man's mental health is based on a certain degree of tension, and that tension is inherent to human beings. Therefore, it is indispensable to mental well-being. Actually, a man needs striving. To strive and to struggle for a worthwhile goal that he has freely chosen. Dr. Frankl describes that a man's needs is a nod dynamic, which means the existential dynamics in a polar field of tension, where one pole is represented by a meaning that is to be fulfilled, and the other pole by the man who has to fulfill it. Man should avoid doing what other people do or what other people wish him to do. Logotherapy tries to make a patient fully aware of his own responsibleness. According to logotherapy, the meaning of life has 3 different ways: creating a work, experiencing something, or encountering someone. And by the attitude, love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of its personality. Hopeless situations also can find the meaning of life, but the suffering is not essential to find the meaning of life. Life's meaning is an unconditional one. Logotherapy is developed as a special technique to handle realistic fear and neurotic fear. Paradoxical intention is also another term of logotherapy, and it is a useful tool in treating obsessive-compulsive and phobic conditions. What is the tragic optimism? Tragic optimism means the one is and remains optimistic in spite of the tragic triad of pain, guilt, and death. It is an optimism in the face of tragedy. This optimism explains that turning the suffering into achievement, deriving from guilt the opportunity to change oneself for the better, and deriving from life's transistorizes an incentive to take responsible action. Sometimes the meaning of life reveals itself, if at all, only at the end of life or at the verge of death like in a movie. Love also can teach the meaning of life.